when we look out 20 years out, a lot of people are talking about the change in no longer needing combustion engines, no longer needing fuel, there'll be charging stations and so forth. When do you start to say, as a CFO, now we need to put more emphasis on this because the return on investment's not going to be worthwhile if we stick with what we have?
You know, we believe as a company that the energy transition is already happening, but we also believe that creates great opportunities for us. Because in the end of the day, we're not a fuel and steel and tank business, we're a customer business. So if our customers' preferences change, we will change with where the customers go. But if you look at the fuel market, the one thing that I think is always important to point out is that the change of transition will look very different for different market and different market segments. So if you take our portfolio, you look at the British Columbia market, the electric vehicle penetration is the highest in North America, even higher than in California.
Yeah.
So that's a market where we see lots of electric vehicles, and we are investing in EV charge points. But if you look in, for instance, North Dakota, where we have a business as well, there are not many Teslas yet.
Yeah.
It will come, but it will come much later. And so that means that our investments in that segment will be later as our customers start changing. But you take another big segment of our business, which is our commercial business, which is mostly diesel for trucks. And what we actually see there throughout all our markets is that demand is still growing. People want more Amazon packages, people want strawberries in the winter, and so that market is pretty robust. And if you look further in the Caribbean, where markets are still developing and people buying their first cars, you still see there's demand growth on traditional fuel. And then for these trucks and the commercial customers, we are investing in already today, we co-processing biofeed into our Burnaby refinery that has lower emission kind of fuel it generates. And we're studying to invest in a renewable diesel plant in Burnaby. It's a lot of money that we need to put in there, but that will materially reduce the carbon footprint of that business. So we're trying to help those commercial customers, which are not that easy to go into electrification, to help them to also meet their environmental goals.
It's interesting when you say this, because for an average business owner in this country, understanding your market, you could be in different parts of the country, and you mentioned British Columbia has a rate of change faster than any other part of the country or any part of North America, so you need to adjust separately or different in British Columbia than you would in other parts of your markets that you have. And so how hard is it for this company and generally companies in this country to start saying, let's adjust? Because my biggest fear for business owners are not being able to change. I call it the Netflix syndrome. People are thinking they're Blockbuster and they stay at Blockbuster and all of a sudden Netflix comes in and they're done. So to avoid that issue, or to avoid the problems along the way, how do you actually find out that, let's go heavy here, let's go light in this area, and adjust accordingly?
Now, I think it's an interesting question, and we talk often about what's called the innovator's dilemma, right? Whether it's been the Kodaks, the Blockbusters and others, and companies that run into that. And I think it starts, there's a lot of dialogue both with our board, but also within our leadership team and our extended group of leaders to start around what you believe. And we believe that the energy transition is already happening, right? And that's an important part.
Yeah.
If you start from the belief that this is not going to happen, it's never going to happen, you come to a different outcome. That's the first bit. I think the second bit, and it was an interesting experience for us to do, is when you start framing the market and you only look at fuel and fuel demand, kind of 20 years out, as you described earlier, it's very easy to see, well, that's only threats. Right? But if you look at other parts, you look at the demand for electric vehicle chargers, that only goes up and up. And so clearly when you look at that chart, you start seeing the opportunity. Similarly, when you look at convenience and convenience retail, which is an important part of our business model as well, that has been growing year over year for 2 decades now and will continue to grow as spending habits actually change of customers. And so it's partly by looking at your business, through the lens of the consumer that you start seeing opportunities, right? So if you call yourself an oil and gas company and that's what you do, the world looks quite different from when you say, no, we are a customer-centric company, and what are the opportunities that come from this transition? Yeah. And I think with that belief, and when you align on that belief, you really start saying, hey, how do we actually make the best use of it? How do we make sure that we are in front of that we are leading through that, shaping the market, shaping how we make money in this, instead of waiting for it to be done to us?
I think you make a good point here. I think when I speak to business owners, they always say to me, well, I have a focus group of clients or customers, and I'll kind of adjust my business to their demands. And that's one way of getting the data. You receive the data by other methods, looking at how customer behavior is. And that can drive, because your customers might be late to the game, but you're losing out on a whole bunch of opportunity. So what's the weight that you give to data that you can get, such as the usage of electric vehicles, and your own customers and what they're asking for? When do you start to say, I'm going to listen to more of the data versus my customer, or my customer versus the data?
Yeah, no, we do both, and there is a micro way of managing that, which is kind of day to day, and then there's the longer term trends, for which I would say we rely a lot more on the data. But of course, when we talk about day to day trends, and so I'll use the example of COVID, right? During COVID, we saw through the data that customers were moving away from small packs of chips. They wanted family-sized bags of chips because they no longer wanted to go to the supermarket. They wanted to come to the store. We found that through the data, but also by listening to our customer, and we can relatively quickly change the products that we sell in our store, and so in that way we respond to that. When you then look more broadly around the fuel demand and the energy transition, many customers say they would like to reduce their environmental footprint, but also many customers tell you that they won't buy an electric vehicle, right, because they can't afford it, right? And so for us, really, it is around kind of looking through the statements and the government policies, etc., and say, how do we position ourselves in a thoughtful way so that we can grow with our customers. And that means we don't have to bet all our money in one go, but we can kind of invest, test, see if it works, and then expand. And that's the way that you kind of marry the data with the anecdotes, if you wish, by putting some money to work and then really testing if it works.
I love the fact that you mentioned invest and test, because that's something that many business owners are afraid to invest, and they're afraid to test. So no matter what size you are, invest and test. I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Make sure to check out the full interview to get even more business tips and insights. Remember to subscribe and follow me on social media at Faisal Karmali.